Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. The purpose of my content is to help the average individual realize that you can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less and make work completely optional, even if you're not starting from the best position. That's what I did, and that's what I'm going to help you do. I was $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know about until the divorce, a single parent with 3 kids. And when I started investing, I was only making about $17 an hour because I had been laid off from a police department and my job. At that point, I had started at a truck driving school teaching people how to drive trucks. One of the things I talk about a lot in my videos is the power of house hacking, reducing or eliminating our largest expense. What I only mention every now and then is the power of that second house hack. Most of us have thought about that first house hack and how we would do it. But what we don't realize is what actually changes in our life when we get into that second house hack. And since I've shared my story before, today I'm going to bring on Bill. And Bill is going to share with us how this is working for him. When he started his investing journey, he was about $100,000 in debt because he had just graduated and was starting work as a PA. So Bill, can you do me a favor, explain a little bit about the size of your portfolio now, but then I'd really like to dig into what happened between that first house hack and the second house hack.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, Dion, thanks for having me on. I've been investing about 2 years now. I just closed on my 10th unit about 2 months ago, just moved in there. As far as where I started, I was, like you said, $100,000 in student debt coming out of physician assistant school the end of 2019. I got a job in a new city and I needed a place to live. So I immediately started looking for a house hack, found a great agent, Justin Brown, in my market, and started looking. Came across a triplex, closed on it about 2 months after I started looking, and was off to the races.
So you had an agent, you found the triplex. Was the triplex from the MLS?
It was. It's actually an interesting story. They're a pretty large property owner in Pennsylvania was selling it. It looked like they were trying to fire sale it. They initially had it listed in the summer of 2019 for like $425, then they dropped it to $400, then they dropped it to $350, and then they aggressively dropped it again to like, I think $319 by the time I saw it. And nobody was really interested in it because there's no pictures on the inside, and all the tenants were like well below market rent, and they had leases for another like 6 months later. So the numbers just didn't make sense on the deal. But my agent convinced me to just check it out, and we couldn't get into all the units. And when we went for a second showing to try to look at all the units, we realized that one of the tenants moved out. Just randomly, I guess they ended their lease, even though they had it for months later. And that was the unit that I wanted to occupy anyway. Put in an offer, got it accepted, and closed on it.
Okay, and so this was your first house hack. It was a triplex. You're living in one of the units. What does the numbers look like in that house hack? What was your mortgage and what were your rent rolls on the other 2 units?
Sure. So when I purchased the place, I got under contract for $314,000, and I got $14,000 in seller's assist. We started with some lowball offers because it seemed like they were trying to get rid of it. So we figured, why not? And we kind of came to the realization that they wanted to net 300 rather than just offering 300 and paying about $14,000 in closing costs. I offered 314 with $14,000 in seller's assist, which made it so I only had to come to closing with about $11,000 down with an FHA loan. It was 3.5% down. I think I had a cost of an inspection in there, maybe the appraisal as well. But the other 2 units at the time were rented for $800 and $650. One of the tenants wanted to leave anyway because she was moving in with her boyfriend. So I actually let her out of her lease early. She was very thankful for that. And the other unit asked me specifically if rent was going to go up. And I told her that it is essentially in a few months, and she ended up leaving as well. I'm happy to kind of discuss those inherited tenant conversations, which I know you have some opinions on as well.
Okay. So once those tenants moved out and you put new tenants in, what do those rents look like now? Or when you were living there?
When I was living there, I got those 2 units leased up actually right in the thick of COVID. So they both moved out in the beginning of March of 2020. So my first kind of investing experience, I had essentially 2 vacant units kind of at the same time with a seemed to me like a big mortgage payment at the time. My mortgage payment was about $2,050, so $2,050 per month. I was bringing in 800 and 1400. 800 and 650 at the time. So 1450. They left, and I got the units leased up for 1350 for a 2-bed, 2-bath within unit laundry. I listed the other 1-bedroom for 1095, and I got 25 in pet rent. So 1120 for a total of 2470 within a few months of me living there.
So you're being paid to live in your first house hack.
Essentially, yes. I did have some expenses, but I had a dumpster on the property, some common electric, some lawn, snow, but essentially it was break even with my first house hack, essentially living for free.
Okay. So instead of having a mortgage payment like most of the other people, or a rent payment like most of the other people that graduate as a PA, you're starting your journey with no housing cost.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So that helps save. You purchased some other units because you said you have 10, you've been investing for 2 years. What does that second house hack look like?
So the second house hack, I feel like first I have to kind of explain how I was able to get the second house hack. So I kind of talk about this a lot in the BiggerPockets Real Estate Rookie Facebook group, but I'm a big fan of the FHA loan. I think it's probably the most powerful loan product out there, especially if you want to get started in small multifamily investing. In order for me to get a second house hack, I had to refinance the first one, because with conventional loans, a 3 or 4 unit, even if it's owner occupied, at least according to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines, requires 25% down. A duplex is 15% down. FHA is only 3.5% down for 1 to 4 unit properties. So I really wanted to use the FHA again, but you can only have one at a time, unless you have a really good excuse to have a second one, which I didn't have. I had to add value to the first one. I did paint, flooring, simple rehab essentially, and was able to refinance out of the initial FHA loan. It appraised for $397 when I was done with it. I got a 30-year fixed rate loan with 3.125%. 30-year fixed brought my payment down to about $1,800. As soon as I refinanced out of the FHA, I was able to then start shopping for another one, and eventually came across a 4 unit in East Allentown, where I currently am in right now.
Okay, so let's look at the numbers on this fourplex. Was this from the MLS or off market?
It was. So it was on the MLS. I actually lost out on probably 3 or 4 other offers that I offered on, because anything that's like decently livable, that's a 3 or 4 unit, was just flying off the market. This one had a cash offer pretty much as soon as it hit the market. I put in my FHA offer, which in today's market, isn't the most competitive offer in the world, but that deal fell through, and I was still interested in the property. The agent came back to me and asked if I was still interested, and I was. So I went through with the deal. I actually went above asking on this one again to get additional seller's assist as well.
So about half of my deals, I've been in second position like that. The seller accepts another offer that I have my agent send an email saying, if or when that falls through, our offer still stands. So it's second position. So good to stay in contact with an agent if you can, in case something happens, because not every offer always closes. So you're in the fourplex now, you're living in 1 unit, and you have the other 3 rented out. What do those numbers look like now that you're living there?
Now that I'm living there, I just raised rents, and the gross income that I have right now is $2,875 between the 3 units, and my mortgage payment, principals, interest, tax, and insurance is about $2,500 per month.
Okay, so pretty close to that break even again. You might have other expenses, and yes, we should set aside for repairs and maintenance. Are you self-managing your units, or do you have property management?
I'm self-managing.
Okay, I do the same thing. I may have a property manager someday,
but not today.
For now, I enjoy that cash flow coming to me. A property manager last year would have cost me a little over $21,000 if I had 0 turnover. And I, in total, did about 25 hours worth of work. So that's over $700 an hour to pay myself to self-manage my own properties. I'll keep doing that. Here's the power of the second house hack. You were break even when you lived in the triplex. You're now in the fourplex, close to break even, maybe spending a little bit of money because you're saving for repairs and maintenance and vacancy. What does the triplex look like now?
The triplex, now that I was able to drop my payment and I got a tenant into the unit that I was living in, For a little bit of context, the unit that I was living in was rented for $800 a month before I bought it. I put probably about 7 or 8 grand into that unit. I made it pretty nice looking, and that's currently rented for $14.95, bringing my total monthly amount that I'm bringing to $39.65 on a mortgage payment of about $1,800. I generally set aside about 15% for vacancy, repairs, and capital expenditures, and then about 10% in property management, which I consider to be paying myself at the time being. The cash flow from that house hack, I kind of consider, which is between $1,200 and $1,500 a month, depending on how you look at it, is covering my student loan payment. Some people, I know they ask the question of, should I wait to invest in real estate until I can pay off my student loans? And if that helps you sleep at night, sure, by all means. But for me, I knew that I could leverage the power of real estate by putting such low money down onto an asset that it was fairly outdated when I bought it, but it was in good structural shape. I was able to increase the value, refinance out, eventually move out, and then the cash flow now covers my student loan payment. And when my student loans are paid off in 10 years, I still have that asset that's going to cash flow until I sell it or die.
That's right out of the concept from Rich Dad Poor Dad. It is okay to have liabilities. Student loans are a liability. You got the degree out of it. You got the job that you have. It is okay to have a nice car, but that's a liability. When you have those liabilities, the best thing would be to have an asset pay for it. Because you're right. When the student loans are paid off in 10 years, you'll still have the asset. Throughout those 10 years, rents are going to increase. And for the most part, your principal and interest are going to remain the same. So your profit gap is going to get bigger. It's going to appreciate multiples of what you invested because you used leverage. Every month, the tenants are paying down the mortgage. So your equity position in that asset continues to grow. So by the time you have the student loans paid off in 10 years, that asset is going to be worth a lot more than actually probably what you paid off in those student loans. So I do something similar. In the beginning, I focused on getting rid of the bad debt. I focused on anything that was 6% or higher interest rate. Everything else, I kind of took my time to pay, but the assets paid the debt off. I used to drive 2 or 3 pretty beat up cars, and I had 3 so that one of them would hopefully run well enough to get me to work. Now I drive nice. I had in 2017 or 18 bought a Corvette. In 2019, get to F-250 jacked up with every extra you can imagine. It literally says the compensator across the tailgate. But an asset pays for those. I am not working, selling my life 1 hour at a time to have those things to enjoy in life. And when they're paid off, which what I'm doing now is I put aside, I've been doing $700 a month, but with inflation, I might raise that into an account for the next vehicle purchase. So it's paying forward to buy that next asset or buy that next liability, but using the cash flow from an asset to do it. You've house hacked twice. In a couple of years, you've acquired 10 rental units. What does the overall cash flow of a portfolio like that look like?
When I'm living in one of the house hacks, or when I move out, because
when you're in the fourplex now, what is it? What are you profiting now?
I would say that I'm profiting. Tough to give an exact number. I'd probably say around $2,000 a month. And that's with me managing it myself.
Okay. So $2,000 a month coming in that you don't have to work for at a 40-hour a week job, right? Correct. It's not taking you 40 hours a week to self-manage your properties, right?
No, not at all.
Okay. It felt like it to me in the beginning, like that first year. But since then, once you get your systems in place and you do some self-education, like going on BiggerPockets or watching content like this, it gets a lot easier. I'm pretty sure people are going to have questions, especially other people who are graduating with a degree with a lot of debt, on how you got into house hacking, how you used your FHA loans. If somebody wants to reach out with questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on BiggerPockets, Bill Goodland, and then probably Instagram is probably the best way to reach me. I do sometimes share some stuff on my stories, or I have a couple posts where I've explained some of the deals. I try not to bombard my friends with too much stuff they're not interested in, but I do share probably the most amount of stuff on Instagram.
I have the same problem. The people that I know outside of YouTube world, most of them don't care about real estate. It's one of the reasons why I'm here. I want to interact with people who actually are into this kind of stuff. So the first property, you said you were out of pocket around $11,000, used an FHA loan. What did it take to get into that second house hack?
Well, the second house hack, I feel like I got a little bit lucky on it, to be honest. I was saving money by living for free in the first house hack, and I had some cash flow from the other rentals I accumulated along the way. But during the time when I was living in my first house hack, I actually got my agent's license, which initially I kind of just wanted it for my own deals. I ended up representing a couple clients here and there, close friends of mine. It allowed me to be able to see my own properties as soon as like a 3 or 4 unit that I would consider living in popped on the market. I was looking at it day one and would essentially have an offer within the first day or two. So I used the same strategy again. I went up on my purchase price in order to justify getting the closing costs rolled into the property purchase, which it needs to appraise for that amount, but I haven't had any issues so far with the 2 house hacks I've done. So the 3.5% down on a $360,000 purchase price was about a little under $13,000. But I also got a commission on that deal, which it was about 2%. So essentially I'm coming out of pocket 1.5% on a 4-unit building, which to me is just insane. It was a purchase price of $360,000. And I actually got prorated rents back for the rest of, I bought it at the beginning of November. So with the prorated rents that I got back and not having a mortgage payment until 2 months later, and I got, rent for November and December of this past year, I was out of pocket next to nothing. I say it's probably under $5,000 of because I got a check for almost, between my commission and the prorated rents, for like $9,000 after coming to closing with 13 or so. So it's very little money out of pocket. Pretty
nice. Sometime you should calculate what it cost. So 5 years from now, you can look at the return and do an internal rate of return and think this was my initial investment, and then think of the 2,000 or 3,000% return you got on your money.
Yeah, pretty crazy to think about. I mean, I definitely don't feel rich yet. I still drive a beat up car, and I still don't live a very extravagant lifestyle. But I know years down the road, I'm gonna be happy that I kind of bunkered down and made some sacrifices with these 2 house hacks.
I'm glad you said it that way. The first 4 to 6 years of investing are the hardest for most investors because everything goes so slow. We feel like we're not making huge advances, but 10 units in 2 years is a huge advancement. So don't feel like that's not what you did. But you're right. You still drive the old beat up car. You didn't run out right now and create more debt to get the F-250 truck that I talked about, because that was year 8 and 10 where I started to do things like that. Once the income snowball kicks in and the cash flow keeps going up because the rents increase, your mortgages are going to stay the same or go down if you refinance to different rates in the future, or refinance to get rid of PMI or MIP or whatever. You're going to probably add more units as you go. The time to enjoy that cash flow isn't very far off. It's another 2 or 4 years. And then you look at somebody's income compared to yours before you look at what they do for work. You're not spending money on housing. They're spending money on rent or mortgage. For the most part, most people are. Not very many people are house hacking. So I'm glad you came on here to share this, to show that you don't have to be an old guy with white in your beard to be pulling off something like house hacking. You don't have to have invested for 10 or 20 years to have benefited from house hacking. You started a couple of years ago and got to the point you are now, where let's just say you never made another investment purchase ever. You live in this unit for forever. In 30 years, all of those mortgages are paid off. In 30 years, even if we had regular appreciation on houses, which on average for the 100 years has been about 5%, in the last 2 years, we've seen 19, and currently from last year, we're seeing reports of another 18% appreciation. So you have that happen over just the 5% for 30 years. You're young enough to retire in 30 years, a multi-millionaire, just based on what you've done in the last 2 years. That's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because it's definitely been a lot of work, and I haven't totally enjoyed the fruits of my labor yet, but I figure after living in this house hack for 1 more year, the way I look at it is, all right, 3 single families, that'll cover my student loan payment. 2 house hacks, the cash flow from that can, pay my mortgage payment of not a dream home, but a home that I'll actually feel like I'm not sacrificing in. So I feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel,
That's awesome. That's what Matt, the lumberjack landlord, did. He house hacked for a while. And when him and his wife, Ashley, actually moved from the house hack into a house, he said, okay, she wanted a house. He said, we'll get a house, but here's the deal. The home payment will be the value or less of the rent that we get on the unit we're moving out of. So if you can rent this place out for 13, 15, 1800, that's the mortgage amount he was spending on his house, technically still living for free because that unit's paying for the mortgage. I want to thank you a lot for coming on here. Hopefully this information is going to help somebody, maybe two somebodies. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.